It's the Mornings on Horseback podcast. Now, here's your host, Kevin Meyer.
Late last year, the U.S. Post Office Postmaster General unveiled a plan titled Delivering for America, which is proposed to revamp the struggling postal service by increasing efficiency and cutting costs, a now popular theme across the country. Upon review by the Postal Regulatory Commission, it has been revealed that rural areas of the country will suffer reduced and delayed postal service as a result of some of these changes. For some, the Commission's report suggests first-class mail will not be received for 6 or more days. Having grown up 50 miles from the post office in which our mail stemmed, I assumed everyone in the world got their mail only twice a week, except in bad winters when heavy snow and wind would make travel impossible and limit the delivery to once a week, or on rare occasions twice a month. Currently, while not living in town, we are close enough that if we are missing an ingredient for a recipe, it's not unreasonable to run to the store and get said ingredient rather than change the menu. Even with this relatively convenient location, we only receive our mail 3 times a week. For those living in the country, delayed mail service is always and evidently will continue to be a part of normal life, where the journey to the mailbox, which can often be several miles from the house, is less of a mundane task and more of a break from the workday, an excuse to sit in a pickup and listen to the radio, perhaps on fancier outfits even enjoy a little air conditioning in the summer or heat in the winter. Part of the reason for the delivery slowdown will be the location of mail processing centers, in which all the mail will pass through on its journey from point A to point B. Wyoming and all of its 97,813 square miles of land will have no processing facilities. Under the plan, all mail in the state of Wyoming will first take a scenic trip out of state, perhaps multiple states, before returning to be delivered to the next town down the road. Although not clearly defined as yet, theoretically, if I desire to send correspondence from my place in Douglas, Wyoming, to a person in Casper, Wyoming, a short 45 miles to the west, it might first be driven 4 hours south to Denver, Colorado for processing, then loaded on a truck and driven back north through both the towns of Douglas and Casper on its way 5 hours north to Billings, Montana, where after due processing, it will return to Casper to be delivered true to the Postal Service motto. Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds. Unless perhaps high winds have shut down I-25 north from Denver, or a winter storm has closed I-90 south of Billings. Sometimes it seems as if we would be better off reinstating the Pony Express. Which brings me to my second point. There are approximately 1.6 million households in America that own around 7 million horses, the majority of which are mainly used for recreational purposes. It is the lament of almost every horse trainer I know, and most horse enthusiasts that I come in contact with, that they had a job for their horse, a greater purpose in their riding other than for the sheer and simple pleasure of being horseback. Would it not be the ultimate inefficiency if we were to combine the challenges of the Postal Service with the desires of the horse community to resurrect this highly romanticized lore of the Old West? Every year, the National Pony Express Association conducts what they call a re-ride from Sacramento, California to St. Joseph, Missouri, following as closely as possible the original Pony Express route. So there is a framework already in place, and I'm sure their membership would be more than happy to sign on as expert consultants. The fastest recorded delivery by the Pony Express was from the telegraph office in Fort Kearney, Nebraska, to the telegraph station at Fort Churchill in Nevada Territory, carrying the news of Abraham Lincoln's election as president. A scorching 7 days, 17 hours. With speed and proficiency like that, a trip from my house to Casper would seem like a day off. Not only would we be streamlining the process of communication by making the shortest distance between 2 points once again a straight line, but we would also be promoting physical exercise, mental wellness through time and nature, less reliance on fossil fuels, and an entire new genre of Instagram posts as riders master the art of getting both the scenery and their horse's ears in the photo. And the Postal Service would change their motto to neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds as they start their morning on horseback. Hey gang, welcome to the Mornings on Horseback podcast. We hope you are in good health and high spirits and not too adversely affected by the frigid temperatures that seem to be affecting a great part of the country. If you or anyone you know are involved in the ranching, agricultural, horse training industries and have suffered an injury or tragedy, please visit hcmbbf.org and apply for emergency aid. The Hal Coker Memorial Buckaroo Benefit Fund is a 501c3 charity set up to help those in need get through the hard times, whether it be with medical bills, vehicle payments, or even feed to get livestock through the winter. At hcmbbf.org, you can apply for aid or make a tax-deductible donation to help the cause. This week we have a very special guest, Mr. Jim Hunt, a rancher, horseman, and horse breeder from Faith, South Dakota, who also happens to be the sitting president of the American Quarter Horse Association. In part one, we talk about his life and upbringing before getting into issues facing the AQHA and the horse business. Jim is a down-to-earth man whose passion for the horse business is apparent right from the start.
Hello.
Hello, Jim. It's Kevin Meyer.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm great today. A little chilly, but other than that, not too bad. How about yourself?
Well, it's kind of the same here at the ranch. We're, 17 below this morning early, and it's spruced up a little bit. I think it's 6 below now, so gaining. We're gaining.
Yeah, well, tis the season for that type of thing, I guess. And really, I don't know about you guys over there, but here we've been pretty mild. We've only had a few days that has been real cold. So, and we haven't had a bunch of snow yet. So I'm not going to complain.
There you go. It don't do any good anyhow. But yeah, we've had 3-4 weeks of. Since middle of December, we had a shot then and the shot in January, and it was, pretty snappy. But my goodness, you weigh it all out, and, we could have one of them years where we had 2 or 3 foot of snow and all that. And actually, we'll start complaining the other way here in another month and a half or 2 months if we don't get some moisture because we're pretty dry. And
well, that's always the way. Us in the ag business, we're really hard to please because there's too much winter, but there's not enough moisture, but there's not enough snow, but it's too dry, and it's too hot, it's too cold.
Yeah, and that's the truth. Kind of like with cattle markets, everybody, the guys say, it's really good, and then they'll go spend all their money they made and buy a bunch of high-priced cows, and then complain when the market goes down, and then and likewise, the bank will loan you a bunch of money when the prices are high, and of course, I used to be a loan officer there in Hewlett for a few years, so way back, and kind of remember how we were advised to loan money, when the prices were low, you better to have your guy think about selling out. When the prices were high, you better help him buy a bunch of cows.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. That's always where I have been is buy high, sell low. It's never steered me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess all of us had kind of held our mouths just right because the weather for the Black Hill Stock Show could not have been better for that time period until the last couple days there.
Wasn't that just incredible? I had to leave after the day after the horse sale and went to San Antonio for 4 or 5 days for the NCBA convention, and to do some speaking there on behalf of AQHA. NCBA and AQHA share the same lobbyist firm in D.C., and so we were dealing with some animal rights issues, and as we always will, and so anyhow, I went down there and had 2 engagements I spoke at. But man, it was 82 degrees in San Antonio. Of course, they have it there in one of those nice motels along the Riverwalk, and and then come back to Rapid City the following, I think it was Friday. There was 1 day left to stock show, and it was 82 when we left San Antonio, and it was -4 when I landed in Rapid that night. So but there again, one of the positive things I told my wife, she said, "Oh, why did we have to leave so early?" I said, "Well, they started to get insects down there," and I said, "You know what? There won't be no bugs when you get off of this plane, so be thankful." Yeah.
That's what we always talk about with the wind in Wyoming is keeps the bugs down, even if it's middle of winter.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, tell me a little bit about your iPod. What's your coverage? I'm just curious.
Well, my podcast is called Mornings on Horseback, and it really kind of started out during COVID when everything was kind of shut down. We couldn't get horses in or out. A lot of our business comes from out of state for riding horses, and so we couldn't really get anything in or out, and I'd kind of been writing some stories anyway of my misspent life, and I just thought, well, shoot, I've always kind of liked listening to podcasts, so let's do that. And I started just telling stories, and then it kind of turned into, I thought, well, here's a great opportunity for me to talk to some people, and quite a few people are listening to the podcast, so it'd be a great opportunity for me to interview some people that are in the horse business or adjacent to it and the ranching business, and get some of these stories out there. And that's the great thing about the time that we live in now, is you and I grew up hearing stories about long dead heroes secondhand. Well, now we can, and some firsthand stories, but we never recorded them, and maybe a few people wrote them down. But here is our opportunity with the technology we have, that we can get all of this stuff down on tape. And I know a lot of the people I listen to are in the horse business more recreationally. And that's really where the horse business has turned, as you well know. And that was great to have an opportunity to talk to someone such as yourself that has been in the horse business for so long. And I read that you have bred over 1,200 horses.
Oh yes, yeah. I suppose Jonah or whoever, they would probably come up with that close calculation through AQHA. How many we've registered, but we're crowding. Joni and I are crowding my 40, and we breed 110 to 20 mares a year here at the ranch of our own, and so I'm sure. Like I say, I don't keep track of numbers that close, but to just top your head, I'm sure all of that. And then, of course, grew up in it. And my granddad, he had one of the first set of registered mares in South Dakota in the 40s, and he always, the old rule of thumb, you needed 150 brood mares to raise one good stud prospect. That was way back in the day, and that was the old rule of thumb. And of course, everything was pasture bred and all that. But so it just, as history would have it, I have always told the family, well, you got to have at least around that 100-headed brood mares if you're gonna get an outstanding individual there. That's always been the goal, to make one better than the year before, and try different. And of course, with technology over the years, yes, it has changed in our options and the availability of quality genetics and all that. Has been really enhanced. However, the old historical thing, to get set a type And to really get that quality prospect, you still got to have around that 100 head of mares and try different things. If you're trying to increase some bone, if you're trying to increase some conformation or prettier head or cleaner necks, or you try different things genetically, and you just breed like you were trained as a kid. And that's the only thing I ever knew. And at the breakfast table is all my life, is when you get up, you talk about what was bred to what and why you did that, and what you were going to breed to what next year, and getting them back from the Brandon Corral. And with that gelding, he had a little hole here or there, and what was you going to do to try to make another gelding better? And that was the strategy, and that's it was go from the pasture to the breakfast table, and that was your classroom, and figure out how you wanted to make one better.
Sure, and that's the best way to figure that out, and it's really, whether it's with horses or cattle, as much as the paperwork is important, as much as the pedigree is important, whether it's written down on paper or not, does that animal do the job? And that's the biggest thing in ranch country with whatever you're doing. And now you can take that all the way to the show pen as well, is the pedigree will give you a guide, but the individuals and the track record, especially of the females, really shows you the performance that you're going to get on the ranch, in the arena, on a trail ride, whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, well, and again, my observation, and then in turn, my thoughts and to my kids and grandkids is that, yes, just like what we've talked, the horse business has turned into not, the ranch horse isn't the necessity that he was 50, 60, 70 years ago. But that same type of athlete, that same type of animal that makes that good ranch gelding, that some of us still use, so it's not as large in numbers as it used to be. We compete with Polaris and Kawasaki and Honda. But still, that same type of athlete that we make on a ranch today is what it takes to go win with these people in their entertainment world or in the pleasure, whether it be cutting, reining, rope horse, deal, whatever. Those are not necessities. I get, their entertainment, but it still takes that quality type of a horse, equine athlete that we make on the ranch. And so they still need us, and that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so your grandfather bred horses. Was he involved in the early days of the AQHA?
Yes. He was not involved with AQHA from a governance level or whatever. My grandfather was Spanish, and his name was Alberto Francisco Lopez. And his family, he was second generation that came from Spain. And, of course, he was born and raised in southern Colorado. He was born on the Purgatory River, and then grew up in the New Mexico, Colorado, on that border down there, around Raton, Wagon Mound, New Mexico, up to Des Moines, up to Clayton, and then up into Colorado. Trinidad Branson was his hometown, and like I said, he was born in a cave house on the Purgatory River. And then as a young, into the Lopez family, and then he, as a young boy, of course, I think finished maybe the 6th or 7th grade, and then went to work for the Diamond Day Cattle Company alongside of his dad and another brother. And the Diamond Day Cattle Company, which was headquartered then out of Wagon Mound, New Mexico, they leased half of the Cheyenne Indian Reservation in the 20s, in the early 1900s, in the teens and the 20s. Mm-hmm. And so when he was about 23, 4 years old, working for the Diamond Day, they sent him to South Dakota with the load of steers, I think 6,000 steers, and by railroad. And then he came up here, and he was a wagon boss. And then when he stayed up here, then he also became their cow-calf foreman. Well, at that time, the Diamond Day, their remuda of horses, they had a set of brood mares, and that they raised horses for the cowboys. And that at that time, that remuda came from one of the premier horse breeders back in the day by the name of Coke Roberts. And my grandpa had broke horses as a teenager for Coke, and then got drafted in the Marine Corps, was in World War I over in France. And then when he come back, went to work, like I said, for the Diamond Day. Well, then he knew that there was a lot of course, Plotted, Peter McHugh, Joe Moore bred horses out of that Coke Roberts deal. And then the Diamond Day took a set of brood mares and some studs to South Dakota, and my grandpa was a wagon boss. Well, then in the 40s, get through the 20s, 30s, and then the 40s, the Diamond Day, they the reservation decided to end that contract, that lease deal. Well, my grandpa then stayed. He liked the grass here, and he had put together a little place of his own at that time. Well, then the government, the tribe and the government said, them horses, as they become less and less needed as railroad and now vehicles and all that, and of course then the plow came in and so forth. Well, those Foundation Roberts horses, the Diamond Day broodmares, they just got kind of turned wild, turned loose.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went to some of those guys and said, if anybody can catch can catch them horses, you can have them. Well, Grandpa knew what those mares were,
mm-hmm.
and so he started gathering a bunch of them wild mares, and he hired a young 10-year-old kid that lived across the Cheyenne River from the reservation by the name of Casey Tibbs. Casey was the closest neighbors of the Tibbs family, and he hired Casey and to help him gather these wild horses, and Casey broke these horses, mares, and they took the studs and they'd cut them and make gildings out of them. So then, long story short, he kept him on as a partner, and then when Casey was 14 in 1943, we have the sale bill, Elber Lopez and Casey Tibbs, and they hosted one of the first gelding sales in South Dakota in 1943. Now, mind you, those horses, yes, they came from Coke Roberts breeding efforts genetically, but they were not registered.
Mm-hmm.
So then as time went on, and Casey, then he made Casey a partner. And Casey would come back, and then he went on to become a 9-time world champion and so forth, but he was always remained a partner with not only my grandfather, but then other aspiring breeders. And then my grandfather then became a member of the American Quarter Association in 1949. And by that time, he had put together about 120, 30 of these mares, and he got a hold of the association, and they sent inspectors up. And they inspected all these mares and everything that would pass the confirmation test and the mouth test and so on and so forth. But he got a set of registered papers,
mm-hmm.
and they became a lot of those original papers. We have copies of them. They're the Lopez Mare 24, Lopez Mare 28, Lopez Mare, and that's how some of those original mares were registered.
Oh, that's
him
great.
Knowing that they came from the breeding efforts of Coke Roberts, who he worked for when he was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that they were a lot of Joe Moore, a lot of Peter McHugh, a lot of, which that goes back, that's what Hancock came from. That's what, Plotted, that was Skipper W,
mm-hmm.
Later, which, I won't go into all that. I'm not a big time Skipper W fan. I think because a lot of the Skipper W deal got a bad rap years later because they were inbred. Hank Wieskamp bred them so tight that some of those inferior qualities, mainly in that case, the mind, they were sulky, pouty, some of them, because we had a lot of them back years later. They were pretty, really pretty. Well, anyhow, so my grandpa, 1949, became a member of AQHA, and then began primarily his, and he had a few paints, crop outs as well, but primarily he was so proud of being a member of this, AQHA was formed in 1940 and really kicked her in gear from about 1945 to 1950. And then I had one uncle, Lee Lopez. He, of course, he got his membership when he was 14 or 15, and my dad became his son-in-law. All of my family, number of years back, were 50-year breeders and then 75-year breeders, and here I am. I'm 40-some-year breeder. I don't even know. I think I'm 4 or 5 years away from being a 50-year breeder myself, because my dad, we always, when we were little kids, we got our first AQHA membership, lifetime membership, which I have today. So, it's just been our life. The historical part of it. And then my dad is part Lakota Sioux. He was from South Dakota, and his family, his great-grandmother and grandfather, their last name was Dupree, Dupris. You pronounce it Dupree. And if you look up Fred Dupree, his great-great-grandfather, he and his full-blood Lakota woman, my great-great-great-grandmother, are the couple that went and captured 5 orphan buffalo calves, and that it was basically known total in existence, and this would have been in 1878 or 1882. I get it mixed up. If you punch it up on a computer on Frederick Dupree, it'll tell you the story. But that would be my great-great-great-grandfather. And he married that full-blood. And so they captured those 5 orphan buffalo calves and grew that herd back into existence. The buffalo herd had basically been wiped out, yeah.
So you really have roots in every bit of South Dakota history, ranching and the native tribes and the buffalo. That is really, really cool. That's really interesting.
I am so fortunate that my children have such a rich history, and not because it's anything they did. That's just what they inherited. And I married a ranch girl, and her family are ranchers, and they grew up in the Badlands of South Dakota. My wife was raised there, and her great-grandfather was the governor of South Dakota in the 30s, and he was the first West River cowboy governor that was elected into office, Tom Berry. Again, coincidental that she and I met when we were seniors in high school and were introduced, and then both kind of did our own thing for about 8-9 years, and she went away and got her nursing degree, and I rodeoed for a while, and then got boogered up a little, and then went to work in a bank for a while, and then was able to come back and buy a ranch and continue to raise our family to 30 miles from where I was born and raised on the reservation here in South Dakota. So, all those things are coincidental, but yes, we are so blessed with our heritage. And then, of course, there's a lot of my wife's family. The Berry family were instrumental in bringing the first Scottish Highlander over here to the United States, and to try them is a outcross because of the cold weather, and they were extremely durable cattle in these storms and winter and so on and so forth. But years later, they became very unpopular for the feeders because that long hair would collect that manure all that. But it's, but you go back to the history, and my kids are so blessed, and that, on both sides of the table, that they, Western heritage, ranching, agriculture, the cattle business, the horse business, that's all our families have known.
Mm-hmm. And are all of your kids still involved with the operation?
Yes, and yes, they're all involved. Some more directly than others, but I have two boys currently serving our country in the Army. One in Kosovo, and the other one is now stationed. He's a pilot, and he's stationed at the Air Force Base in Rapid, Black Hawk helicopter deal. But they all have cattle and cows, and all come back to the ranch. And I have three children. We have seven, and we have three children. My oldest son is on the home ranch where I was raised, and he's running that, and he has five little ones and a real beautiful ranch wife, and they're run a Angus cow-calf operation. And Joni and I still primarily run the American quarter horse operation here south of Faith on this ranch, and like I said, we breed about 120 mares, and between the two ranches, we run about 1,000 straight Angus cows presently, and then I have my oldest daughter is not married, and she's on the ranch here with us, and then another son that has a degree in biblical studies, and he come back to the ranch, as did my daughter, who has 3 degrees. She's a elementary education, and then she went to massage therapy training in Texas for a few years, and then she come back and finished a degree in surgical technology. But she and my son Josh offered to come back to the ranch so I could serve the AQHA for the year.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's outstanding, and that shows you the work ethic that is learned when you are raised up in a ranch like that. And it doesn't matter whether it's a heritage legacy situation like you guys have, or a different farming and ranching situation. That really shows how much responsibility, work ethic just comes inherently in being raised like that.
Well, and in turn, as a boy growing up, you always heard about the one-room schoolhouse, and you always heard about, work ethic. Yes, that work ethic was derived because the one-room schoolhouse, my mom and dad, they all rode 7 miles to the country school horseback morning and night, and blizzards or no, and had a little, stable there to school, and ride to school, and ride back home and do their chores. Well, Joni and I homeschooled our children, and same thing, other than they got up and they had their chores to do, and milked the cow, and had wood to cut, and so on and so forth, and it was so that they could experience I'm not going to say the joy. They could experience the joy of appreciating coming into a warm home, or coming into a wood stove that was, we have a log home here, but anyhow, we for educational reasons wanted our children to know what it was like, and the privilege to live off of the land. Mm-hmm. Wood, firewood, and milk a cow, and all those things, and not that we weren't equipped, and again, I have a degree in ag business and a minor in biology. My wife had a degree in nursing, and so on and so forth, but we just could see that, man, we want our kids to have what we had. Yeah, and that's why we had the opportunity, and was blessed with the opportunity to buy a ranch. And my dad's ranch wasn't, at that time back in the day, wasn't big enough for everybody, and so we were able to buy this ranch and add on to it basically, and so mainly to raise our family in the same lifestyle we have. So you get back to to the horse thing, and so. Again, my grandfather and my dad, and then they always hosted a production sale, quarter horse production sale, clear back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s. Well, then, when Joni and I got married, as time went on, some of the best genetics that in the 70s and 80s that my dad had was some sugar bars and some San Simon King-bred mares. And so when Joni and I were able to, we bought this ranch, and we knew that we, at that time, probably had about 15, 20 mares of our own. My dad still had a big bunch, and I had mares over there too. I told her, I said, if honey, if we could find, what's out there left, and this would have been in 89, 90, 91, 92 in there, if we could find, and I knew there were some out there, but probably wouldn't be for sale, an own son of sugar bars or two, and maybe an own daughter of sugar bars or two. And I had bred some mares to the last son of Lad Leo, and he was in Idaho at the time. This would have been in the late 80s, early 90, 91. And so I found the daughter of sugar bars out of a Oklahoma Star bred mare that was down in Oklahoma, and she was still she was in her mid-20s, but she was still producing, and so I made a trade for her, got her bought, and Sugar's Misty Morn. And then we found a son of sugar bars, a red dun, 15-3. His name was Sonny Sugar, and he was out of a Xantanon bred mare, Sonny Kimball Bazantanon, and he was out of sugar bars. And we were able to get him bought in 93. And we brought him back to South Dakota, and we began to, again, reestablish as close as we could to those sugar bars King Leo genetics. And kept, at one point, I had 56 or 7 granddaughters of sugar bars in my broodmare band. Again, following the life lessons that my grandfather taught, again, you got to have a sizable herd of broodmares to get that one really quality individual every year. And if you're going to set type, you need brothers and sisters. If you're going to set type. And so that was our objective, and it was very good to us. And we have, I think I've got one daughter of Sonny Sugar left. She's 27 or 8 years old. She was out of the last crop of his, and of course she's not producing anymore. But she'll live her life here. But she's was a driftwood bred mare on the bottom side, and out of that son of sugar bars. And then I found another son of sugar bars out in Washington that was out of Mr. Barnum bred mare, and his name was Time for Sugar. And I only got a couple of colts out of him, and he was a nice horse, but he was 26 or 7 when we got him. We gave it a try, and we had a goal, and that was, when you look at the sugar bars Leo Cross, it was good 60 years ago, and it's still today. If you think about sugar bars and Leo, you think of Freckles Playboy, and Colonel Freckles. They were both sired by Jules Leo bars. What was he? He was a son of sugar bars out of a daughter of Leo. You think of Flit Bar, these barrel racers today. They get a lot of speed in there, but a lot of the Firewater Flits and the Dr. Nick bars and the Bar Monies and on, and the Flit Bar, what's he? Well, Flit Bar was the son of sugar bars out of a daughter of Leo. Or you go to the Otos, and a lot of good calf horses and barrel racing horses. Well, Oto was son of sugar bars out of a daughter of Leo. So what I try to explain to folks there, what it was Jim Hunt thinking when it come to the genetics part of our horse operation. I tried to be a good student, and I did not create anything new. I tried to be a good student and watch what my grandpa did, what maybe some of his neighbors that were horse breeders. One of the other families in this area, one of the first AQHA breeders that came to South Dakota in 1949 was a man by the name of Art Reeves. Art had 2 sons, Buzz and Dean, and of course that's where, though that family is where Tom Reeves, world champion saddle bronc rider, he's the grandson of Art. But the Reeves family, they brought to South Dakota a lot of bartender breeding and a lot of Harmon King by Harmon Baker by Harmon King, and then back to King 234 again, and really some good bone, solid foundation breeding back in the day, and they were originally from Texas, but they went to work for a ranch, a big ranch up here in the 40s, and stayed, and the Reeves family, and then of course the Sutton families. They were some of the first breeders in South Dakota to reach out and get, good quality genetics, and they were instrumental in helping form the AQHA, not only in South Dakota, but now even at the Amarillo level, at the national level. But I try to be a good student of what those breeders were doing and did and have done and still doing. And, I think that's the wisest thing a guy can do if you're going to get into the breeding business or in the training business, and that's be a good student yourself and always be objective and open to make one better, whether training or breeding. Mm-hmm. And because there's always going to be one come along that's going to be better at some point. And so be a student. Don't be a know-it-all.
And so, it's always seemed to me along those same lines, and I've had this discussion with some people, is breed what you want to ride and what works for your job, for your country.
Right.
And if that works, people will come buy it. You don't have to breed what is the most popular thing going, because if you breed the right quality, it will become popular.
You couldn't have said it any better. That is so true. That is what has made every individual, whether it's Kevin or Jim's program, whatever that might be, training, breeding, both, combination of both, whatever. And that is people believe in you. And they believe in what you want to breed and raise and so forth. And how often have we watched through the history of quarter horse breeding, for example? This is the same thing in cattle industry too. But for an example, for quarter horse breeding, everybody wants to win, and so a lot of people they'll go buy their success, and they'll go buy what's hot or popular. Take the cutting horse industry, and boy, don't get me wrong. These double bred dock bar, line bred dock bars, and then you the smart little Lenas, and you can go on, and the metallic cats now, and now the on and on. There's two things to observe there. One, they are athletes, and they are full of cow. That's bred in them. However, would most of those horses work on a big 50, 60, 70,000 acre ranch all day long? No, they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. Why? Because a lot of them, when it boils down to it, there's a lot of inbreeding there. They are bred up so tight, and so much dock bar, so much Dockolina, so much, of those same genetics, that's where you start getting inferior qualities. That's what happened to Skipper W. They bred so much Skipper W on Skipper W that affected them a different way. They're neurological. Their minds got affected. Mm-hmm. Well, in the cutting horse industry, this is Jim Hunt's analysis. In the cutting horse industry, when you bred so much Dockolina to Dockolina to Dockolina to Dockolina, and then Dock Bar back on highbrow cats and Doc's Hickory and Dock Bar, what'd you lose? You lost your bone. Mm-hmm. You lost your foot. Mm-hmm. And in turn, the Hancock people did the same dang thing years back in that, we need bone, we need structure. What did they do? They started breeding Hancock to Hancock to Hancock to Hancock to Hancock. What happened? They started getting feather foot, started losing the croup, muscle over the rump, and they got a bunch of hard-headed horses. Mm-hmm. So, same thing in the racehorse industry. Look at what they did with jet decks, and way back in the day. So the top deck horses, when they started breed, because what do people want? Oh, if it's good, they want to make it better, so they're going to want them faster. They bred the minds out of them horses. They could run a straight line, but that was it. So human nature, as it is, all of those different breeds have good qualities. It's just a lot of times we as human beings haven't been the good stewards that God wanted us to be, in that we got greedy. We wanted to, win. We wanted, and if this was good, more of it would be better. We started getting some inbred horses.
Yeah, and then with the inbreeding, or line breeding, is what's the old joke? If it works, it's line breeding. If it doesn't work, it's inbreeding.
Yeah, that's one definition. Yes.
Along with that, we start seeing some illnesses, some genetic illnesses that pop up, and strangely enough, lack of performance. The horses stop performing. They, like you say, they just get too tight. I was involved with a very good friend of mine. I leased a ranch from him. Great guy, and he's pretty brilliant geneticist. Guy named Sam Schultz, and he did basically line bred driftwood, Hancock, and Blue Valentine.
Yep, I know Sam.
Yeah, and I announced his sale several years, and I remember one. And he has really, really good horses, don't get me wrong. And I rode several of them. And one of my most favorite horses I've ever ridden is one of his studs that he sent to me to train. But I can remember reading the pedigrees at his sale. There was a horse, but Leo Hancock Hayes was on this yearling's papers 4 times.
Yep.
And that's pretty darn tight. So and so there's several of these bloodlines that people just fall in love with, and then, but at the same time, industry wide, we talk about the cutting horse business. Everyone says we need to have an outcross, because right now it's either a highbrow cat mare out of a Pepto stud or vice versa, and every now and then a little dual ray. But who's going to step up and take that chance with the money that is at stake to get the outcross?
Yes. So now let me come at that one from the executive level of AQHA. I too believe, and I very strongly, that our gene pool in the American Quarter Association is very small now again, and it's forcing a lot of our breeders to have to line breed. I mean, you can't hardly put one together that there isn't, a bunch of Leo in him, a bunch of King, and not that it's bad, but it gets too tight. And what's the result of that? Every other year now arises a new genetic defect. Mm-hmm. We used to have a 2 or 3 blood panel test. Mm-hmm. Then we went to a 4. Then we went to a 5. Now we're at 6. Now there's going to be number 7. Because what happens is, through science, technology, we find a new defect that pops up about every 2 years. Whether it's HERDA, a skin disorder, whether it's, back in when Impressive was, it was the HYPP thing, mm-hmm. So the result of being so closed in on genetics, inbreeding, you're going to get more defects. And it's going to get to a point, if they don't allow some outcrossing to come in, some more thoroughbred lines or something that's totally separate. Look at what happened when they did it with 3 bars. It was a savior mm-hmm. to the genetic, way back in the day. Well, Jim Hunt's opinion is we have got to allow something to come in with some new outcrossing, because we haven't got no place to go in the American Quarter Association as far as you're going to inbreed something. There's mm-hmm. going to be line. You can't get away from it. Mm-hmm. So I think that AQHA, their objective, the heart was in the right place, still is, that where we want, a pure breed. We protect those genetics. We want them to be real. We want to know what they are so that breeders don't make mistakes. That's the purpose of all that. However, we are so tight, so closed, we're forcing our breeders to make mistakes, and they can't help it. That's why that's why we need some allowance for now, some outcrossing. And so I hope that there's our genealogists and our stud book committee and so on and so forth I'm hoping that they will be more open to the need for that. That there's some good thoroughbred lines out there, or maybe even, I'm not going to say Arabian. Of course, the old thought there was you got to be careful. The Dock Bar was out of an Arabian teasing stud. Whether he was or wasn't, we do know 3 Bars was thoroughbred. We do know the Dock Bar back in the day. Look at what he did for the cow horse world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it is time to open up that gene pool and try to bring in some outside genetics.
Well, that's certainly one of the challenges that the AQHA is facing. And I want to talk a little bit more about, before we get into the positive stuff, what are some other challenges that the AQHA is facing right now? Well, the horse industry in all its entirety, I guess, the entirety of the horse industry, but AQHA specifically. What are just a couple of the challenges that keep you awake at night?
Good question. It's a good question, and it's one that I've had the privilege, and I say privilege because when I got involved with AQHA, I'm not a show person, I'm just I'm part Indian ranch guy from South Dakota that was born and raised, as my wife was, around Western way of life, and good horses, good livestock, that was part of it. When I got, when I was approached by one of the past presidents, namely Johnny Trotter, and that came up here to one of my production sales, and we were informed that we had, one of the larger groups of brood mares in the industry, and I was from an area in the Dakotas up here that represented ranch breeders, and that they needed to, again, they were losing their respect or momentum or whatever you want to call it with past members of the AQHA, that AQHA had become somewhat more of a show organization and had gotten away from the roots, the foundation of being a breeder's registry. And the more and more and more that I was introduced, long story short, I was asked if I would consider getting involved. And so after several years of being introduced to some of these really wonderful people, past presidents and so forth, I opened my mind to possibly becoming a national director, and then was placed as a national director at the national level. And then from there was asked if I would ever consider serving on the executive committee, and then was nominated, and here I am. So to basically be a voice for the ranch breeder. When I got in there, I had no idea that the American Quarter Association has members in over 90 countries. We have breeders, people that breed the American Quarter Horse, in 38 countries. And sadly, we used to be a breeding organization of over 300,000 members. Now, we're down to about 240. However, the ultimate registered foals was 140,000 back in 2004. Then it declined, and went down to about 60,000 foals. Probably 8-9 years ago. We are now gaining, I think, back because of some of the past presidents that came and said, we would like to reach out and re-engage some of you breeders. And so we started the Ranching Heritage Recognition Program. We started recognizing, again, more appropriately, our breeders, our ranch breeders. That's who formed the American Quarter Association. So then you find that people are really devoted. If you pat an old cowboy or an old rancher on the back and you say, that is quite a horse. Geez, that's a nice horse. You know what that guy's going to do? Usually probably choose a little snuff, and he'll spit, and he'll probably say, "You want? Come on in. I'll give you some coffee. I'll tell you a little more about my other horses if you want to hear."
Yeah.
Then By golly, he likes my horses. I think I better make another one or two like him. That's how it works with your foundation breeders. If they're producing something that you approve of, they're going to make more of them. So the association began to again come back up the ladder a little bit as far as we've had about a 3% increase in membership in the last 3 or 4 years again. And last year, we had 76 or 7,000 registered foals that were born. This year, we're slated to have 96,000. My point being that we are increasing again, and I give credit due to the fact that we're out there again recognizing the breeder, because we're a breed association, and people appreciate to be recognized for what they're doing. So the good part about the AQHA is that we are the largest registry in the world, breed registry in the world. And we did lose many connections previous years because we basically lost our focus. Now we're trying to balance that. So now let me go into this. What has happened, and Kevin, this has never changed, and this will never change, and that is the need and acceptance for a good horse. Even when we were in the Depression, a good horse, a good one, always sold good. Mm-hmm. And a good one was always in high demand. You can overflood a market, but that's your mediocre and your bottom end horses, and they become less and less and less and less. But a good one always has had and always will have value. What happened with the equine industry and the AQHA in the 50s and 60s and 70s was the measuring stick of the equine athlete in the quarter horse world. They lost that. Mm-hmm. They lost that recognition. They lost that credibility. And because they got so strung out, and then we had more concentration on, the governance became more concentrated on show detail, the show points, the show world, the shows. We forgot we're a breed registry. Mm-hmm. And we got all of these other quality animals now. We got the NCBA. Now we got the Team Open Series. We got the National Snaffle Bet Associations. We've got, there 15 or 20 of them now. And what did they do? They went around the AQHA and they created their own now association mm-hmm. that fit their needs. Mm-hmm. And so the AQHA became secondary. And in fact, there was multiple attempts for other breed registries to start their own registration process. Never succeeded. Mm-hmm. There was the Foundation, there was the Palomino, there was the different, and I'm not bad-mouthing them, I'm just saying that they could never accomplish what the original American Quarter Horse Association did as a breed registry.
We have to mention my absolute favorite registration association, which was the, and I know nothing about it other than seeing the name, the National Grade Horse Registry.
Yeah. Well, at one point there was a Hancock Association that was going to get to. There was a Driftwood Association that was going. So there was. Again, breeders felt the need to create their own recognition to break away from the AQHA, but were not successful. Mm-hmm. Because, again, I think what the forefathers, kind of like our country, what they initially developed and stated, it was the original, purpose of the American Quarter Horse as a breed registry. It was right on target. It's what we needed, and we have tried to refocus on that, and they have brought back in not just Jim Hunt, but other breeders like myself that have been willing to step up and say, okay, if I've got if I can, through my history and my upbringing, if I can help, bring to light some good principles back onto the table, that we can, we need to get our association back to what it was meant to be. And it was meant to be a breed registry, not a show management outfit.
In part 2, which will be posted in a few days, Jim and I talk further about the horse industry, including the issue of the proposed additional regulations to the Horse Protection Act. Be sure to subscribe to Mornings on Horseback so you don't miss an episode. Thank you to Hans Peterson for our intro, Tim Cox for our cover art, and Wiley and the Wild West for our theme music. Don't forget to catch me Tuesday mornings at 8:26 on The Morning Show with Jake. You can stream that live at cowboystatedaily.com. Until we can visit again, enjoy checking the mail. And stay safe.
The hooves of the horses, witching and sweet, is the music earth steals from iron-shod feet. No whisper of a lover, no trilling of bird can stir me as hooves of the horses have stirred.